Good morning, and thank you all for making time for this important reflection meeting. As moderators of Civic Space TV, we know that the space exists to expand, to animate civic space by amplifying citizen voices, strengthening constitutional literacy, and holding power to count. 2025 has been a defining year marked by so many political activities and early positioning towards the 2026 general elections. So today's conversation is not just about counting episodes or measuring views, it's about impact, relevance, courage, and responsibility. We want to reflect honestly on what worked, what challenged us, what we may have missed, and how we must strategically position ourselves for 2026, a high-stakes election year for democracy, human rights, women, youth, and marginalized voices. So this discussion will help us sharpen our direction, strengthen collaboration across shores, and ensure Civic Space TV remains responsive, bold, and people-centered going into the next year. But to begin with, I would like maybe all of us to say hi to each other. And, I will start with how the names are arranged on my screen. So I'll ask Douglas Drake Onen to introduce himself and say hello to to our other participants. We know each other, but just.
There. Good morning. I hope I'm audible enough. It feels very peculiar this time around, sitting on this other end of the camera, being interviewed and the one answering questions and not being the one asking the questions. I'm definitely looking forward to this interesting conversation and to offer my reflections on the conversations and events that shaped the year 2025, but also offer insights on my expectations for the year 2026. I'm very happy to be here. Douglas Drake Onen is my name. Thank you.
You're sure as well, because you cannot assume we know.
Definitely. I do host the Youth Roundtable. Of course, I'm very happy to be here, and I'm happy that my colleague Sharon is here. She's the host of the university show. I started the year hosting the university show before I went to Youth Roundtable. So I would say I partially hosted Youth Roundtable and partially hosted the university show. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Drake. And the next on the list is Sharon Mukisa. Sharon, please unmute and introduce yourself, but also say hello to our other participants.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Sharon, and I've been hosting the inter-university debate show, just like Drake stated. He was the one hosting at the beginning of the year. I just came in mid-year, but I've been hosting the show, and I'm very, very happy that I got to meet all of you and learn from you. By the way, I watch all the shows. So I'm very happy now that we are all coming together for this end of year review. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Sharon. And now I hand over the mic to Mulisa. Phillip, talk to us.
Yes, greetings, good people, and thank you so much for one, convening us here, but two, for everyone that has been able to join in here. I am from Community Voices Uganda, and certainly I'm the most well-traveled amongst all of you, because every other week I'm moving across the country to pick the different views of persons from the north, the east, the south, the center, and indeed even outside the country. So it's an honor to be here, and certainly a little uneasy looking that there is someone now on the other side and trying to make sure I say something. I hope I have what to say, but thank you so much for having me, and let's have a good conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Phillip. Then over to you, Isaac.
Thank you, Nancy. Good morning, everyone. My name is Isaac Kwagala. I am the show host for Focus on Parliament. Focus on Parliament is a program that monitors parliamentary business and its performance, and in the process, draw out accountability on behalf of the citizen. I am pleased to join this discussion, seeing that we are reflecting on the year and also sharing our thoughts and expectations on what is to come in the new year. I can't wait to listen from all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isaac. And lastly, we have Lynn. Lynn, please talk to us. Philip was saying that he's the most well-traveled person. I don't know, Philip. Lynn may have to disagree.
Well, Philip, well done. Kudos to you for traveling. And on our behalf, a very good morning, and I'm happy to see you all. We have come to 2025, December, the end of the year. This year has been a bit of loaded year. You know, that year that is quite loaded and is yet to explode. So I worry that it might explode much later in the next year. But I'm happy to be here, and I host the Uganda Diaspora show. I can't wait to see what the year meant for all of you. For me, honestly speaking, very loaded, not loud, and it leaves me in a space where I'm thinking 2026 might be very scary, but I'm hopeful. We trust God that things will go well. Happy to be here.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Is your network okay? Is your network okay? We had you breaking at some point.
Oh, sorry. Let me see what I can do about that.
Yes, but we got everything you said. We got everything you said. It's just that there was a little breaking.
Okay. Let me
Yes.
make sure it is stable. Thank you.
Oh, okay, no problem. So as before we get into the main conversation, let me introduce myself once again. Nancy Caroline Ayot, and I host the Women Speaking Show, Tuesday show. And I am also very happy to be here as your moderator and as the host of the Women Speaking Show. So as we begin the conversation, I would like us to start with Lynn. With Lynn, and as we share our reflections for 2025. And here is the question: looking back at 2025, what do you consider the most impactful conversation or moment from your show, and why did it matter in the broader civic and political context? Lynn.
Sorry, I missed that. I was stabilizing my internet. What did you say?
I said, looking back at 2025, what do you consider was the most impactful conversation or moment from your show, and why did it matter in the broader civic and political context?
Wow, that's a loaded question. Why I'm saying loaded is because we've had quite a number of these shows, and I can be honest with you, they've all been exciting. There's a conversation I had not so long about I will need to be sure. But we've had quite a number of these conversations, and I figured that we are still in the same space as Uganda Diaspora show. Why am I saying this? There's lots of concern on the show, especially about the human rights space in Uganda, the way the investment climate in Uganda, and how all these things are playing out as we head into 2026. But importantly, the fact that this was a pre-election year, and the preparation, the resounding effects, or should I say, the aftermath of 2021 general elections is still quite prominent. People have not fully recovered from what happened in 2021. And so while we sit and have conversations about 2026, while we sit and look at what could have transpired the previous year, well, not yet previous, but this year, still the resounding issue that I saw prominent on the show was the fact that there's worry, and this is not just in Uganda, but also our diaspora people worry that there might be a repeat of 2021. However, to your question, I remember the most profound and most interesting conversation I had was after the death of Raila Odinga's passing. It was a bit sentimental, it was a bit touching, and a bit more, insightful in the way people reflected on the passing of Raila Odinga. Then there was an interesting conversation where the National Unity Platform was seeking about, I think, 90 billion Uganda shillings abroad to facilitate their party issues, their party, what is it called? Their party, as they head into, of course, the election year. So there was that caught my attention. Because when you look back in Uganda, the constitution does not allow that you canvass for money to support your political activities. But here, National Unity Platform was doing so out of the country. And it sort of made nobody bothered about it. And the diaspora community was willing and very supportive. And so I asked myself, so what are we doing back home in Uganda? Why are we not, poking fingers and saying, National Unity Platform, you ought to, stick to the constitution and do certain things right. The Electoral Commission does not allow for certain things to happen, but it happened. Then there was also a very interesting conversation. Allow me, I know you've asked for one, but it can never be one. I remember we also had the show where we talked about the deal to accept USA deportees into Uganda. I don't know if any of you remembers that. There's a time we had the US was striking a deal with Uganda to send some deportees here. And then that was also a very deeply concerning conversation. There were allegations that some of the deportees were criminals. And so there was a back and forth here in Uganda about why should we agree to that deal? Must we bend that law to such a deal that might get our countrymen and women in trouble because we are having to accept criminals? I think from what I recall, the year has been quite long. I might not get all the details of what we've talked about. But from what I can recall, I think those were some of the areas, some of the conversations we had. Oh yes, I remembered one more. There was a visa ban on Ugandans and Uganda. So that conversation sort of really put everyone on tension. And remember, there was a moment where the US almost was deporting quite a number of people. So Ugandans were also scared. Ugandans in the US, they were scared if you did not have papers. We had a very interesting conversation then about USA international visa ban on Uganda. And for me, I think it shaped the narrative on what next for Ugandans in diaspora. They ought to have their papers in order. They have to organize their citizenship problems, and which is one of the core areas that we focus on the Uganda Diaspora Show, to make sure that Ugandans in diaspora are catered for back home. They're able to be heard and able to have their issues addressed back home, but also maybe at home should focus on the Ghana diaspora and what they have to, do, because their remittances are such a huge contribution to the Ghanaian economy. I think, Nancy, that's pretty much it. There could be others, but those are some I could come across. I could think through maybe just offhand, and I'm really happy that we did have interesting, impactful conversations. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. That was Lynn, and maybe later on we'll come back to listen to Lynn's challenges and what she hopes for 2026 in the next year. But for now, allow me to cross to Phillip Mulisa from the Community Voices to give us insights on some of his most impactful conversations and how they mattered in the broader civic space and political context.
All right. Thank you, Caroline, and thank you, Lynn, for that. I think you do a good job in making us travel around, not just Uganda, but across the world, in understanding what are the things that actually shaped there, but also ended up becoming very important for everyone. And building on really the background Lynn has created for us, I think we entered there with about three issues that upon which we were uncertain as a people. And one of them was a Trump win in the United States of America. And of course, going into his swearing in on January 6th, rather confirmation, and then the 20th. So you didn't know what was coming for the world. There was a lot of uncertainty, and you've had Lynn telling you that later on you had things like the change in immigration policy, deportations of persons. We know until today now, America's people in the United States are crying over that ICE agency, Immigration and Citizenship Control agency. People are crying over the tariffs that were introduced by President Trump, and even us here in Uganda, we ended up with a 15% tariff, but we know there are countries that ended up with 30%, 40%, 20%, and of course the continued fight with China and the different other players, India, Russia. Then of course the shift in how the United States was looking at the conflict in Ukraine, and somehow what people have ended up saying that President Trump is siding more with Russia, and a lot of things. It was uncertain, and indeed, the first 1 year of President Trump has proved that the uncertainty was qualifiable, and a lot of things have happened in a way that no one expected. So that is one of the things that have greatly shaped not just Uganda, but the world at large. The second thing, especially at the level of Uganda, was again, we entered there with Dr. Kizza Besigye arrested, whether you call it arrested or abducted from our neighboring country, Kenya. And there was a lot of, again, uncertainty about this particular situation because Kizza Besigye is not an ordinary citizen. This is a person that has contested for presidency 4 times. This is a person that has led the opposition since the early 2000s. And there was a lot of conversation about why, what, how, and how it is going to unfold, and indeed how things were to be handled. And until now, that uncertainty has taken us through the year. And you cannot, I think Isaac here would be more credible to discuss that issue because he has been a part of the team that has tried to secure justice for Dr. Besigye. But even today, it is an issue that has shaped a lot of how political players have engaged with government, have either participated or restrained themselves in doing certain activities in the region. And indeed, it has also had an implication on our relationships with the neighboring countries, Kenya, whether you talk about how we've interacted with the DRC, how we've interacted with Southern Sudan. We know that at the moment we have a deployment in the DRC, we have a deployment in Southern Sudan, we have a deployment in Somalia, Central African Republic, and of course other places that are rumored. So that is another area. Of course, the detail can be very wide, but it is also one thing that shaped a lot of how the politics was to move within 2025. The other point of uncertainty we had was the relationship between the Patriotic League of Uganda and the National Resistance Movement. And you get to realize that people were trying to, how do we align? Because you have a party in power and a political outfit that is seemingly in power, but is creating an impression that it is opposed to power. And people were confused. Members of the NRM don't know where to align. You have members of parliament that are moving across. You have decisions taken by NRM and PLEs challenging them. You have a lot of comments. You have a lot of political rallies and drives within the city and across the country. And there was a lot of uncertainty. But I think by the end of the year now, we've, of course, seen a bit of harmonization and these people merging to go back into government and having one front against the opposition. But again, you are not sure what is going to happen maybe in the next 2 years because PLE is still there, the NRM is there, and there is talk of transition. So you don't know how these are going to unfold. And people in the communities are looking a lot at what can come out of this. And for me, I think those uncertain things then took us into then the other things that kept on coming into the country, the electoral season, the electoral calendar, voter registration, primaries of the different constituencies and areas in our country, but also party structure elections. These are things that the communities have been looking at closely, participating in, because even as we speak, the campaign season is on and people are looking at who they will vote, and we know what comes with campaigns. I know a few people have been caned, some people have been killed, other people have been successful in their politics. So again, that is another, but maybe among the many, the last two I should highlight a little bit is the launch of the National Development Plan 4, which should be a strategic plan for what Uganda is going to do, especially that government is promising us that they're going to transform this economy from a $50 billion economy to a $500 billion economy in the next 5 years and latest 10. This plan is what Ugandans are looking at. Okay, if you've given us this plan and you've given us staff in terms of cabinet, in terms of members of parliament and the leadership at the different levels, will these deliver on this plan? And in any case, is this the plan that is going to deliver change, better living, better education, better healthcare for Ugandans? And can we trust that you can deliver on this plan as the NRM government or whichever government that will be in power after January 2026? And lastly, an interesting one, Uganda being able to host Chan in that Pamoja initiative with Kenya and Tanzania. I think it is one of the light moments Uganda has had in the year, and indeed, even with the challenges that came in between, you appreciate that we are able to host that and looking at hosting AFCON 2027. Among the many, I think those are some of the issues and stories that really shook the nation throughout 2025 and continue to shape a lot of how people are living in the communities and indeed how people will react to the poll in January 2026 and how they will indeed move through that new year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Philip. Indeed, Community Voices is a very unique show, and I follow you guys closely. And to go to the next person on the conversation, Douglas Drake Onen, if you could come and give us your take on what shaped the Youth Roundtable this year and some of the most notable conversations that you had. Drake.
All right, thank you very much, Nancy. I want to take a very different approach to the conversation now, though. Philip and Lynn have given us a robust explanation as to what covered most of the year. So, in a listen to Philip gives you an introduction to the activities that shaped the year, of course, starting with the Trump win in the United States. But I think I will dwell my conversation on primarily. So as I was saying, that I will center my conversation on two fronts. One, I will look at the East African community situation, but also take it around, the international standards as well. But just quickly to respond to those key significant conversations that shaped the Youth Roundtable. One of the most important ones comes down to the Supreme Court ruling of the Kawaziruka case, that of course that preceded the UPDF Amendment Act that goes ahead and offers very draconian offers draconian laws in regards to political prisoners and individuals who have possession in regards to seemingly similar regalia that is close to that of the UPDF. Of course, another local significant event that shaped the conversations on Youth Roundtable stemmed from the State of the Nation's address that, of course, laid foundation for the reading of the national budget. Of course, the conversations around the Youth Roundtable centered around seeing that the health sector has this time around received some significant amount in terms of budgetary allocation, but we of course noted that that is not significant because there are certain sectors like education, among other sectors, that are still underfunded, and yet we still see that the military is heavily funded. So that's a conversation that shaped the Youth Roundtable. So in just a nutshell, in regards to conversations that shaped the Youth Roundtable, we talked a lot about elections, the state of human rights in the country. We hosted various aspirants for the positions of the special interest groups, from youth leaders who are running operations in the north, in the east, in the west, to discuss with us about their plans and aspirations that they have for the young people. But most importantly, now I would like to take my focus to the conversations, in my opinion, that are on the show, but also individually, I think was very significant to the year in regards to the status quo in the East African community. The first and important significant event to me that stood out was the question to do with Tanzania. We have seen glimpses of various humanitarian atrocities committed to the Tanzanians over the other side. And of course, considering that Tanzania has played a very critical and pivotal role in influencing our democracy as a country, seeing the scenes that we saw on our various phones and televisions, of course, depicts a very deploring situation in Tanzania. So I think, in my opinion, that was a highlight for my year as well, because Tanzania's democracy, quote unquote democracy, is of course under threat. And for Uganda, that has had a very close relation with Tanzania in terms of shaping our political history and journey, it makes us wonder whether the East African community is on the right path. Secondly, we have seen a lot of arrests happening in Uganda and in Kenya, but also in Tanzania. Various activists were arrested. In Uganda, we had activists from Kenya who were intercepted. Of course, at first, the officials were saying they are not aware of these individuals. But later on, when they were repatriated, the president comes forward and says, these individuals were coming, they're experts in riots, so they had to intercept them. We also saw our activists being arrested from Tanzania as well. We saw Dr. Kiza Besigye being intercepted and arrested from Kenya. So that comes down to the East African situation. So that, in my opinion, those are highlights that significantly shaped the year. As someone who is very interested and grounded on the East African integration question, I think those are very key events that shaped the year. But most recently was the president's comments to do with the Indian Ocean. Of course, that raised various that raised numerous eyebrows in regards to whether it is threatening the sovereignty of the state of Kenya. But my personal opinion is that the question of integration has been long overdue. But as we end this year, but also as we move towards the question of answering the integration of East Africa, this Indian Ocean saga, in my opinion, shed light to the conversations that most of us are afraid to have, irrespective of people making memes and laughing about it. In my opinion, I hold a view that, of course, this is not a show for us to talk about it, but in my opinion, I think that was a highlight, and that's moving forward 2026. I think we are going to see more items or more of these, conversations that seemingly try to align us to think of an EAC integration. Then lastly was, in my opinion, another highlight of the year was the fact that, Uganda has an open door policy to refugees. But most recently, of course, after the halt of, or the closure of USAID, as we are all aware that happened this year after Trump's win, the halting of refugees from Somalia, from Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Somalia from coming into Uganda, of course, made headlines, from our open door policy to freely accepting refugees into the country. But now the government goes ahead and says these are countries that are not experiencing any turmoil, or individuals are not experiencing any political persecution. So we therefore stop these refugees from coming into Uganda. But close to that, I think also it's important that we talk about, as I end, the significant events that shaped the year on an international stage, is where we saw some of our African leaders fly over to Washington to sign a peace accord. Quite laughable. But you imagine, of course, it was actually President Museveni who goes ahead and says we need to find African solutions. We need to find African solutions to African problems. And I think also that makes sense as to why he goes ahead and sends, with due respect, the Vice President of Uganda to go and represent the country, because he doesn't believe that that peace deal will yield fruit. So those are, in my opinion, are significant events from an East African perspective, but also from an international perspective that shaped the year. Otherwise, before I forget, the conflict in Sudan, it's a conversation that I am passionate about, that also talked about passionately on the Youth Roundtable. And I think Sudan is still experiencing conflict, and as people who propel these conversations on Civic Space TV and offer numerous platforms for individuals from the youth to students to policymakers to community members to members in the diaspora, we need to continually talk about the conflict that is happening in Sudan, because it is one that is presenting a huge humanitarian crisis, and we need to continuously talk about it. Otherwise, those are, in my opinion, are key significant events that stood out in the year, but also shaped conversations in Youth Roundtable. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Drake. I think Lynn had your call for more conversations on Sudan. And now I hope that we can have Sharon, Mukisa Sharon, can you hear me? As we wait for Sharon, perhaps we can have, Sharon, please.
Yes. Hello. I'm in a bit of a noisy place. I just hope everyone can hear me. Well, with the events or activities or the shows that have really impacted and shaped Uganda, as well as the discussions that we've had on inter-university debate, number one, I would say the budget. Number one, I would say the budget, the fact that the budget was passed. We had a discussion around that. Let me first list what we talked about, and then I'll get into those key activities or key topics that really stood out for me during the shows. First of all, we talked about the budget. Then next, we talked about the State of the Nation address. We also talked about the Chan Games. We talked about also NRM primaries. We talked about Kadaga versus Anita Among, one of my favorite shows. And we talked about nominations of Uganda's president, the elections. We had a lot of shows around the elections because we were having the debates. So we talked about the elections and the constitution at 30 years. We talked about the Kawempe North by-elections. We talked about Tanzania's Samia Suluhu and the Indian Ocean. So for the event or the topics that really stood out for me, I would say number one was the budget. The budget was such a big discussion amongst us, the youths, and a lot of people out there, but I'll speak for my show. It was such a big discussion because we got to see that the things that we believe in as Ugandans were actually not being valued. We were seeing education being given such little sums of money. We were seeing health being given such less sums of money compared to military, compared to what these government officials were getting. In terms of salaries, in terms of posh cars, in terms of just things, lucrative things that they actually don't necessarily need. But here we are seeing the same cycle of poor health, bad health conditions, the same hospitals, no improvement, just little sums allocated for just getting basic medicines into these hospitals. Also, education has given very little money. And this definitely worries us because we've grown up, we were saying that education is a key to success. And a lot of people today have said that has changed. It's no longer the key to success, it's other things. But it's because the nation does not believe in education. A lot of people that we put out there into those spaces, into those platforms to represent us, forget about education. And now they focus on other things. They don't really build us for such a long time. Then secondly, I would like to talk about the State of the Nation address, because we saw the president come out, give us all these amazing statistics of what he thinks is on ground. This was funny to me and a lot of people that were on the show, because it was more of like lying to us in broad daylight. You get me? It was more of telling us of the things that ought to have been done or what they would have expected, but that is not what is on ground. Giving a false report, giving false statistics. I mean, saying that the PDM has helped this number of people, so and so has built a farm. From the 1 million that I've gotten now, that the farm is like worth millions of money, which was not the case. So this was officials. This was us getting to see officials lying to the president, and the president just picking up this information and coming and presenting it to the whole of the nation. Thirdly, the Chan Games. Now, the Chan Games, that episode was one of my favorite episodes because I would like to say I'm not a sporting fan, but and when Jack gave me the topic that time, I was like, oh God, now I have to talk about sports. I don't really like sports, but I made my research and I actually watched, I think, about 4 to 6 games full time. I was actually surprised that I could follow up that much, but I watched the games, I enjoyed them, and I built an opinion around them because I had to get to know what the games are. I had to get to know who the players are, the coaches, all of those things. And in doing so, I got interested in doing sports, watching sports, and discussing the topic of the Chan Games in Uganda. It also brought to light a lot of things that we ignore as a country, because the Chan Games sort of just happened. We didn't know that they were happening. We just saw people. I live around Nambole, so we just saw that the roads are being blocked off. We just saw that roads are being diverged. You're supposed to use this side. There are games happening. There are things we didn't know about, but we just got to see that, people are moving in this direction. So there are games now. There was no advertisement, proper advertisement. We were not really prepared to host them. We just saw them happening. So the Chan Games brought out the fact that we are not as prepared as we'd like to say, or may seem that we are. We are not prepared to host. There were issues with ticketing, accommodation. All of those things brought to light the fact that you've been given this grand opportunity that is going to market Uganda on a tourism level, because we have players, but also supporters of those players coming into the country. So that is something we ought to look at. That is going to boost our tourism. But you can't get simple things just as accommodation ready. You cannot say that these are the 10 5-star hotels that we have on board. So those are some of the things that really stood out for me personally on the show, and I really, really enjoyed. Maybe lastly, Anita Among versus Kadaga, I really liked people's opinions on that and their views. And those were the topics that shaped the inter-university debate from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sharon. You do a good job, and kudos to you. Isaac, can we hear from Focus on Parliament, from Isaac's Focus on Parliament? Isaac.
Thank you, Nancy. Focus on Parliament. I should begin by saying that I wish I had spoken earlier, saying that particularly Drake and Phillip, we seem to have a meeting of minds on some of the key reflections and highlights that have defined 2025. So on the basis previously established, let me just say that I don't know, perhaps I should attribute it to my democratic governance bias or justice bias, but the standout story for me is the abduction of Dr. Chiza Besigye and his associate Ajobed Lutale in Nairobi, the capital of Kenya, which set in motion a chain reaction of events that culminated in the seminal decision of the Supreme Court. That decision effectively disbanded the General Court Martial, having been found by the court that the trial of civilians before military courts is a flagrant violation of the Constitution. Of course, that has been a long contention of both political activists and human rights defenders. But why it is particularly significant is that the participation of Dr. Besigye in that discourse, if you like, it quite substantially amplified the need for the court to resolve that controversy. Of course, that victory was short-lived, seeing that now the government, again, the state, in clear violation of the Constitution, because the Constitution prohibits Parliament from circumventing a judgment of the court of law. So it has gone ahead to enact an amendment of the law and reintroduce essentially the same provision. We wait to see what the human rights defenders and opposition political activists can do about it. But my prediction is we are most likely to see a challenge again in the Constitutional Court, seeking to set aside that specific statute. Again, the events surrounding the abduction of Dr. Chiza Besigye also have really, strategic implications for our broader political architecture. Because as you know, I think it was Phillip that pointed out, Dr. Chiza Besigye is a politician with a prominent profile. He's contested for the presidency 4 times before. He's been quite central in the discussions to agitate for a smooth transition from the Museveni almost life presidency to a new president. So the fact that he was arrested shortly before the election, because that is in the context of the lead up to the January 2026 pause, is also quite significant. There have been sentiments that perhaps the state was motivated by the need to arrest, nip in the bud, strong political activity aimed at procuring a new constitutional democratic order for the country. Some other people have opined that this was illegally, strictly rather a matter of national security, and therefore the state was duty bound to move and ensure that the threat which had been assessed was eliminated. Be that as it may, we are all alive to the ongoing proceedings in the High Court touching on the same matter. Regrettably, the trial is yet to commence. There has been back and forth between the judge, the presiding judge, and the prosecution. But there is one key element that I would love to cite, and this touches on the credibility of the judicial processes. Dr. Besigye and his co-accused, Ajobed Lutale, brought forth a petition for consideration by the Judicial Service Commission for the presiding judge, the Honorable Justice Baguma, to recuse himself from that matter, contending that given, based on his previous conduct, which they consider to be manifestly biased, but also some of the happenings in the lead up to that trial, they were convinced that they would not have a fair, free trial as guaranteed by Article 28 of the Constitution. Surprisingly, there has not been a response from the Judicial Service Commission to date. The other contention was about the way the trial itself has been managed by the judiciary, right away from the lower court at Nakawa, before committal to the High Court. So they are utterly convinced that they cannot obtain justice as contemplated by Article 28 of the Constitution. So the most recent development is that they have now moved the Constitutional Court. They have petitioned it to determine substantively whether a judge who is the subject of proceedings before the Judicial Service Commission, acknowledging that, of course, there is no resolution to their complaint before that body, if they can credibly proceed to hear and determine a criminal matter where the accused have complained. So it's quite a serious controversy. We wait to see how the courts will go about it, what kind of determination they can render. But I think even in a jurisprudential sense, it will be quite a significant contribution to our nation's jurisprudential body. So that aside, the second issue I would address is the South Sudan question. Why is South Sudan quite of importance to me? It is for the reason that South Sudan is such a nascent country. They are our neighbors in the north, and there have been several peace initiatives to try and pacify that country, to bring political stability to the country. But just like most of the other African countries, really, a fair-minded individual cannot fail to apportion blame to the leadership of that country, because there have been several accords agreed upon by the various national stakeholders, that is the representatives of the government, and then the other factions in the government, and most significantly, international partners, to ensure that stability is returned to that country. But the government has consistently violated the same. It has not allowed space for the development of national institutions, which, as is being hoped, would culminate in a process where a national election would be held, and then a democratic national leadership would be ushered in the country. So this year, we had manifestations of friction and pockets of conflict, where the government swiftly moved to arrest the leading opposition figure, Dr. Riek Machar. He has been now arraigned in a military tribunal, more or less the same situation, not dissimilar to the circumstances of Dr. Chiza Besigye. And the country is gripped in some sort of permanent political and military crisis. I have seen a statement by the US State Department, I think last week, condemning the attitude and the actions of the South Sudanese government and urging them to change course. So I am only hoping that with such serious diplomatic pressure, perhaps they can reflect and revise the approach they are taking to that, governance problem of theirs, because there has been a lot of goodwill demonstrated by the various stakeholders at the continental level, at the international level. But it seems to me that the government of South Sudan is not willing to cooperate with, all these efforts. So the conflict there seems to be intractable, but I don't think really that we cannot have a solution for it if we were to successfully procure the goodwill of the South Sudanese government. Then there is the question of, again, relating to democratic governance, the elections. Yes, the recent disputed election in Tanzania, our neighbors to the south. That is also a clear demonstration that I think democracy is still something which is some sort of anathema to African leaders, because for the longest time, Tanzania has been regarded as an oasis of peace in the volatile Great Lakes region. The ruling party, CCM, has been in power since independence. And there have been, since the restoration of multi-party politics in the 90s, of course, some contestation, but nothing to the scale that we have witnessed, especially the violence. Of course, the response of the government was strongly violent. The cost of human life is so steep, very high. And Tanzania is now discredited in the international community. Characteristically, the East African community has not moved to demand for accountability, because I think the situation there emboldens the other leaders to continue the same trajectory. So for me, Nancy, those are the three major highlights that have defined 2025 and focus on Parliament. Maybe lastly, there is a phenomenon of the incessant supplementary budget requests by the government in Parliament, which are clearly inflatable. There is no serious regard to accountability for the public, but yet Parliament keeps on passing them. So that also blurs the line between accountability, Parliament being an accountability forum on behalf of the citizenry, and holding the government to account. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isaac. And now for our next session, I hope that we'll keep it at 2 minutes each, so that we can wind up, because we have other activities coming up. So I will quickly share my reflections from the women's show. And this one comes in two parts. The conversations that we kept referencing to, especially regarding the state of human rights, which was the abduction of Dr. Kizza Besigye, the Supreme Court decision, the plight of political prisoners, and of course the effects of the UPDF Amendment Act 2025. Also the election series and the brutality of the armed forces kept coming up. You know, in all the different conversations that we had on the women's show, we kept going. We kept referring back to these events, even when it's not particularly about them, but it's like it shaped the entire conversation. But also we talked about the Gen Z protests worldwide and the price of civic disobedience. In the women's show, when we look at these events, we look at it in terms of how much it affects gendered, how much it affects the civic space in terms of gendered violence against women. But if we're looking at specific conversations, one of the biggest conversations that we had was the Kawempe North by-elections, and it's the projections, but also the aftermath of the elections. Another was the Balalo question, and how divisive politics was going to shape the elections of 2026. Also, the plight of migrant workers in the diaspora, especially in the UAE and the Middle East. This one was a very emotional conversation. We also had the analysis of the Supreme Court decision, which earned us almost the biggest views this year. So the summary of all this is that on the women's show, the recurring theme was that there is no equal application of the law in the country, that as the democracy of the country continues to go to the pits, the civic space is also vanishing. And when we talk about the vanishing civic space, we also talk about credible personalities from the women's movement. For example, we lost Rhoda Kalema this year, we lost Mary Akororo Kurut this year. So it was actually a sad year for us on the women's show. And most of the conversations were shaped with the question of what do we do now? What do we do now? What's going to happen next? So there is a sense of foreboding from most of the conversations, but also a hope that something can turn around because of that one Supreme Court decision, because they're like, we didn't expect this decision, but things can happen. So as the civic space is vanishing, the gendered violence is also twice as worse. So that could be my submission from the women's show. And so as we go into the next phase of the conversation, which is the conclusion, we'll be talking about your hopes for the next year. And I would like to begin this conversation with Lynn again. Lynn, you can tell us your hopes for 2026 and maybe your parting shots as well.
Well, thank you. Everybody, wow, what a year. Glad we're here. And I've been here reflecting as far back as January, and I'm thinking it is a blessing actually to be alive today. But going forward, you see, next year it's like I said, is a volcano about to explode. So we need to be ready. But importantly, I think because being an election year, it is going to be one to look out for, one to prepare for heavily. And why am I saying heavily? We need to prepare in terms of our mental status, our economic status, and otherwise. But maybe in terms of the shows that we host here at Civic Space TV, it is time we tightened our seatbelts and remember that next year is going to be one hectic year. That's the beginning of it. But as I look forward, I am thinking there's going to be quite a lot. Intensified, first of all, political mobilization. As we go into the holidays, remember, 1st January will mean that we have about 14 days to go to the vote. So we need to be ready. There's going to be a lot of political heat here and there. Heightened security presence is what I'm looking at. Consider if I could take a leaf from what happened in 2021. Then we might see, of course, much later, legal and administrative disputes around the electoral processes, post-election discontent. We'll see. I'm like we're saying, projections. So economic expectations, political participation, and if not well managed. We could generally 2026 is hinged on what happens on January the 15th. So what we need to do is be available, be consistent, be clear, be ready. I mean, the economy needs to be stabilized, and we need to be uh, comforted by the Ministry of Finance. And I insist on this because we need to know that the economy, despite the political pressures that are already being seen, will not interfere with the entire, the whole year or that period, the political period. So we need to stay clear of any issues that might raise security concerns as a citizenry. I always encourage people to be very careful how they go about their day-to-day. Yes, we have freedom of speech. Yes, we have freedom of association and the like. But do not entice the security now to also hit back. Sometimes I know they're really unruly, but can you also not tickle them into getting into your space? On the Uganda Diaspora show, I'm hoping we can have a shift in the way we have our conversations, especially regarding issues that affect Ugandans. I would want to see a shift, especially as we go into the elections. I want to hear how people have voted in the different countries they reside. I want to see how that, plays out the rest of the year. So there's so much I'm looking forward to. There's a lot I'm expecting. Hopefully, I'm actually praying for this, to be honest with you. I'm praying for a credible electoral process, not just a peaceful one, but a credible one that we will see making sense for all of us, one that will be safe and secure. We saw what happened in Tanzania. It was very disheartening. And that, sort of, created a lot of fear around us, especially being this, the East African community. And so I'm praying that Uganda picks a lesson from Tanzania and decides to be very peaceful but very credible. The discontent we saw in Tanzania was very painful. We already have enough problems around us. I'm excited also. Yes, quickly, this came to my mind. Oil. We'll have our first oil next year. So that's quite exciting in very many ways because we've had conversations about the first oil coming. I have lost count of how many years ago we first had. I didn't think 2026 would finally come. So may God help us, and we are there to witness our first oil. I'm sure it's going to be a big, big one. I also pray that Dr. Chiza Besigye will finally, get out of that prison. It's too much. Sometimes we need to tap into the humanity of ourselves and just calm down a little bit. So I'm hoping he can be released. There's a lot I'm looking forward to. The peace deals that President Donald Trump deals. So because his administration has fast become a deal administration, and I want to see if these deals actually come to fruition, because man, everywhere a deal, everywhere a deal. And when you look at his national, is it security? What is it? The NSS. I'm forgetting the other S. That has been going around strategy. My goodness, deal after deal. It has become the US first, and the rest of you can do whatever you want to do. What do you have to offer? If you don't have anything, that's the door. I want to see how that is going to play out globally, because everyone is concerned about that strategy. So yes, there's so much more, but I do not want to waste more time. We know not, and I want to close with this and say Uganda does not need just a calm election in 2026. It needs a credible one, because credibility buys stability long after the ballots are counted. So the question before Uganda is not whether 2026 will happen, but what kind of country emerges after 15th January. So with all these expectations we have, that I have, that you have, what will our country be like after January the 15th? I thank you and happy holidays.
Thank you very much, Lynn. And now we'll have Phillip give us his projections and his closing remarks. Phillip.
Oh, all right. Thank you so much, Caroline, and thank you, Lynn, for that projection. I think it makes a lot of sense for the context of Uganda. And largely for me, in very brief terms, I want to say I am very optimistic. I think there's going to be a lot of good things happening, not just in Uganda, but for the wider region of East Africa and the greater Africa. I am, for example, very happy about the recent milestone by our company, Kira Motors, and our bus. We know that they've had a journey to Cape Town and back, and they are showcasing what Uganda has been able to put together as in the area of automobile, and that is interesting. So for me, I'm looking out for more good stories, and I'm paying very keen attention to the youth movement. I want to see what the youth movement is going to be able to deliver for Uganda in terms of influencing what decisions are taken at governance level, at spiritual level, at cultural level. And I think the choice and the decision the youth will make starting today, going to the new year, and looking at the broader 5 years that are coming in, they will influence what Uganda will be as we get into this season, because it is also inevitable that the new term we are getting into is a term that is most likely, maybe at the end, maybe before it ends, that is going to give us a picture of who the next president of Uganda might look like or might be. So I'm very optimistic that a lot of changes are going to happen, and things should change for the better. But also, I think looking at, because of that, the relationship between Uganda and its neighbors, it is going to be very critical for how we then move forward. And most importantly, the relationship between Uganda and Rwanda, which is historical but also brotherly, but also having a non-NATO ally in the East here, Kenya, and how their interactions with the United States will affect whatever happens within Uganda, and progressively how we are able then to shape the region that has a lot of unstable communities, whether you're talking about Southern Sudan, like many of you mentioned, whether you're talking about Dagalo and Burhan in Sudan, whether you're talking about Puntland, Somaliland, and the Republic of Somalia, whether you're talking about Ethiopia and Eritrea, or Ethiopia and the Tigray. These are all conflicts that are just within us. So our relationships with all these players outside of us, but where we have interests and they also have interests here, and we interact with them on the daily, will affect a lot what will come out of our country, and indeed what country we build for the next 5 years, but also progressively for the future of Uganda. I think we shall have a great year, and I pray that we get to deliver on ourselves a better living. Phillip Mulisa, thank you.
Thank you, Phillip. The optimism is bouncing onto me, and I love it. I like it very much. Yeah. So for the next speakers, I hope that if the previous speakers have already shared something that you wanted to share, you can skip that and only focus on what you believe has not been shared. So Drake, can you come in and share your projections for 2026 and participants?
Thank you. I'm going to be very brief. I am in joyous moods. I will not take much time. Lynn and Phillip have done justice to expectations in terms of what to look at when it comes to the elections that are to happen in January. But what I can say in that regard is I hope and I pray that we have peaceful elections come 2026. And my prayer is, let's go cast our votes. Of course, we cast our votes cognizant of the fact that we want a peaceful and prosperous Uganda. So my call is to all Ugandans out there to peacefully cast their votes, but also to us on this platform today Today we are panelists, but as moderators on our various platforms, the students, the youth, the women, the diaspora, the community. As we have these conversations, let us continuously provide a platform to ably talk about these things. So from me to everyone out there, I would love to wish you a Merry Christmas and a prosperous New Year. Thank you.
Thank you, Drake. We feel that joy. Now, let's have Sharon Mukisa. Sharon. Sharon, can you hear us?
Yes, hello, Nancy. Oh, sorry. Hello, Nancy. I can hear you. I had actually just reached office. So it's okay, Simon. I'll be there in a minute.
You're in time for lunch.
She
Yeah.
is.
So with expectations, actually, I didn't get to maybe state this as a little bit of a concern, or I think a challenge we may have is next year, the first 2 months, I would say, are going to be actively about elections. So having people or youth come out and actively and loudly speak about elections and criticize them and critique those areas that need to be talked about may actually be a challenge. And I hope that we can inspire them in some way and encourage them in some way to come up and talk about them, because this has been 2025. This has been a year where people have come up to speak about what they expect, to speak about what is not right. But next year, in the first 2 months, may be a bit challenging, because I know a lot of people will still be hiding in the villages. A lot of people will be biased with tear gas. A lot of people may be influenced in a negative way. And I feel like it is our responsibility as people that host this show, and also people that are part of CCG, to ensure that we encourage people to still speak about this, not to fear to criticize them, not to fear, not to be arrested. We pray and hope no one is arrested next year. But going into next year, expectations, I expect to have a great show, honestly. And I'm expecting more people to come up, more faces, new faces, because I've faced some questions or inquiries in the past where people thought that the shows were for specific people.
Sharon?
Where they keep on having guests all the time. So sorry, is the network okay now?
Yes, go on.
Yes, so I'm hoping to see more new faces as guests on the show, and I'm hoping to have more exciting topics as we've had this year, and those topics that critically make us to analyze certain aspects of politics, governance, and so much more. And my message to you in this holiday season: happy holidays, everyone. I hope that we eat as we remember. January, we may not have food, but happy holidays, everyone. Have a very good, happy December and January.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sharon. And lastly, Isaac. Isaac, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, Nancy. My forecast for the new year is not particularly positive, especially seeing the current trajectory of things on the political front. 2026 is the polling year for the country. Well, I might sound rather pessimistic, but this is from a pragmatic point of view. I feel that unless something, fundamentally alters the balance of power from the current grip of the leadership to a more democratic-oriented leadership, then we are having it bad as a country. And especially seeing that it's also a transitional phase, the friction between the military leadership of the country vis-a-vis the citizenry who are clamoring for a democratic transition is not particularly something to be positive about. But at a personal level, I think now counterintuitively that should constitute even more motivation why we should agitate, why we should speak out more, and why we should all collectively expect better, because we need to also draw a balance between expectation and then what we are doing individual and collectively to ensure that we have a new reality. So I feel more motivated at a personal level, but the outlook is not particularly positive. So let us go into January, do our civic duty, vote, and then we wait to see what happens. If it is rather very negative, then we'll continue the spirited fight, challenging the dictatorship and, doing all we can to ensure that we have a reversal in that space. But as a platform, I want to appreciate all of you for what you are doing to amplify the voices of the ordinary citizen. And yeah, let us continue collaborating and doing our utmost to ensure that we see a new Uganda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isaac. And, from me to the team here, I believe that most of my projections have been shared, especially the ones regarding elections. But I believe that one of my biggest hopes for 2026 is that we see a decrease in the violence, because that is the biggest standing block between women and political participation, the violence. And so I also hope that we will have an incredible year. I joined the team this year, and I am very honored to be among all of you, to be moderating this session to even begin with. And I hope that 2026 will be everything that we hope for, and that Uganda will stay safe, but we shall still have credible elections. And, I would like to release all of you, because this is now time for enjoyment, and the clock is ticking and the tables have been set and everything is ready for you. My name is Nancy Caroline Ayot. Thank you so much, and much love from here. Merry Christmas, and hope to see you in a few. Bye. You can log off at your convenience. Bye.